Welcome to Moderate to Severe, the podcast where we will dive deep into what it means to be a man today and tackle the real and raw issues facing us. We've created a safe space for setting aside the bravado, peeling back the armor, and talking about what's really going on inside. Mental health is no longer just a buzzword. It's real life and something that I, just like many of you, suffer through daily. I'm Jonathan Scott, and I want to focus on the value of vulnerability through personal stories, expert insights, and practical tools to help you take care of your mental well-being and redefine what strength really is. We'll dive into the everyday battles we face, from handling stress, overcoming self-doubt, and figuring out how to ask for help and accept it. Each week, I'll be sharing my own experiences, along with stories from other men, mental health experts, and everyday people who have seen or been through it all. So if you're here to listen, to learn, or just feel less alone, you're in the right place. So get comfortable and let's break the silence together. Hi, welcome back to Moderate to Severe. I'm Jonathan Scott, your host. And today I have someone very special. I have Officer Derrick McManus, but he's not an officer from the States. He's actually from Australia with a great story to tell. And you all know how I feel about the law enforcement and our military men and women. And, it's really a great honor to have him on today. So, Derrick, how are you doing today?
Jonathan, I am sensational, and all the better for being on your show.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and, what you got going on now?
Okay, I'm a retired police officer because I'm old. Retired police officer down in South Australia. And for those of you in America who don't understand where South Australia is, you've got Australia, you've got Sydney over this side, you've got Perth over this side. South Australia is right down in the middle at the bottom. So we're a quieter state, and I was a police officer for 42 years here in South Australia, and I was a member of what we call Star Group. You have SWAT in America. We do extra above what SWAT does. We do everything that SWAT does, but we do over and above that as well. So Star Group is Special Task and Rescue. We're responsible for high-risk arrest, hostage siege, and counter-terrorism. I actually trained with the SAS, which is equivalent to your Marines or Delta Force. And I trained with them in counter-terrorism, and I was also an underwater diver as well, and tactical diver. So, and my other specialist skill was I was a sniper. So it was a fairly intense environment, but for all of those who go into that environment, we just love it, absolutely love it, and I loved my time in there. These days, I get to travel the world. Because of what happened to me while I was within Star Group, and we will get and talk about that very shortly.
Absolutely. Now, Derrick, all those things, when did you know that you wanted to get involved in law enforcement and, particularly the high risk law enforcement areas?
Okay, so this is maybe the embarrassing part of the interview. It was never my passion to get into law enforcement. My brother was my hero, 2 years older than me. He wanted to be a police officer. So I've just gone, my hero wants to be a police officer, I want to be a police officer too. And all my family said, oh, you only want to do it because Brian did. And I've gone, no, it's my passion. And my brother changed his mind and became a butcher. But I didn't change my mind. So I came in here without a real passion for it. Still loved it, absolutely loved it, and loved every day of my career. But I got bored with being a police officer because it just wasn't a passion for me. And I was looking through advertisements for other jobs, and somebody said to me, why don't you join Star Group? That just seems to be right up your alley. And I had a look at Star Group, and I've gone, do you know something? I can't think of anything else. That looks like it will be fun. Literally, that's what I thought. Looks like it'll be fun. So I went and joined Star Group. And when I got into Star Group, I found my passion. I found that passion by chasing the fun and then giving meaning to it as well.
So how long were you on the streets when you decided to join Star Group or follow the passion, as you said?
About 11 years. I've been on the road for about 11 years. And to be able to apply for those sections, you have to be extremely high performing on the road. So as much as I say it wasn't my passion, I did an exceptional job while I was in there. I enjoyed it, absolutely enjoyed it, but it wasn't my base passion. And it wasn't until I got into Star Group where I had the higher level challenges, the higher requirement to step up to leadership and take control, that I actually started really enjoying that career.
So, what were the first couple years like in Star Group when you first got started?
Oh, massive challenge. Um, when you go into Star Group, as I said before, you have to be a high performing police officer, but you go from being a high performing police officer to back down to the bottom of the rung. You are the beginner, you are the new guy, you're learning all the new skills. And the first 2 years is probably just um, learning those base skills. You're certainly fully operational, but you're given an intense base training. And then you're just trying to refine and hone and find out what works for you, what doesn't for you for those first couple of years. And then after that, you're able to start stretching and performing at presumably that elite level.
So, you had come into an incident you said before that you would talk about. How many years were you on the force before that incident occurred?
So that I joined the academy in 1976. I am that old. I graduated in 79, and this incident that we're going to talk about, where I was shot 14 times in less than 5 seconds, happened in 1994. So I'd been out on the road for about 14 years.
So about 3 years in the Star Group.
Correct.
Oh, so you were just young, and before we get into it, you're going to get into the story, but you said you did 42 years. So after this whole thing happened, you went back to work.
Absolutely. I was shot 14 times, lying on the ground for 3 hours before they could get me out. Went through 2.5 years of rehabilitation and went back fully operational with Star Group.
Oh, you went back to Star Group. You didn't even go back to regular, police work. You went back into the SWAT Star Group. I did not know that.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So let's get into it. All right, we're about 5 minutes into it, and I'm chomping at the bit here. So let's get into it. What is the details of that day that the 14 shots?
So we went to arrest a guy who had a warrant for his arrest, and that was for 197 counts of fraud, not something you normally associate with violence. And you can jump in and ask me questions here any time you want to just clarify or whatever. But we knew this guy's history. He had made threats to shoot police officers in the past. When we confronted him about the threats, he said, "Oh, it was only a joke. You shouldn't take these things so seriously." But obviously, we do. But he'd never done anything of violence. He'd never had any offences before in his life at all. But he was being investigated for 197 counts of fraud. So we knew his history. We went there as Star Group wearing full flat vests and full blue uniform. We knocked on the front door. He didn't answer. We had a sniper sitting in the bush for about the last 20 minutes, just watching the house, watching the offender so that we knew exactly where he was and what he was doing and his level of threat at that time. When we knocked, we knew he was inside, but he didn't answer. We knocked a second time and he still didn't answer. At this stage, we were standing across the front of the house, spread out, sergeant at the door. I was on the far right-hand side, and I saw a sliding door down the side of the house that I thought was going to be a better entry point than what we had chosen without actually being at the house, because it was going through the front door. There was a screen door, then we were going to have to use the battering ram on a solid wooden door. But if we could use this glass sliding door, it's just a matter of tap it, smash it, and enter.
So now I'm picturing the house rural, or was it like a neighborhood where he's
Not
living?
rural.
Okay,
Rural. He was on about a 20-acre property.
okay. I'm
Yep.
just wondering because I'm thinking, and in my head, I'm picturing all of you guys just surrounding this house, and you're talking about a battering ram, and I'm like, is this in a neighborhood? Because up here in the States, I'm thinking I live in a neighborhood, but I've been to rural areas, so I'm wondering what kind of situation that is. Okay, so we're in the country. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
So no, no, not a problem at all. So just to give you a little bit of context for that, this one is in the country. I have done these operations with the same entry system um, probably 1,000 times in the city. Um, in fact, we went to one place where we were, it was a really tight community, and I had to try and get observations on the red side of the house. And I went to the neighbours dressed up in all my black gear in that day, with gas mask hanging off the side, knocked on the front door and just said, "Excuse me, would I be able to sit in one of the rooms alongside this house and just look out through your window and observe it?" And they've just gone, "Oh, yes, okay." You don't often say no to a police officer in black uniform. But yeah, we went to this house. We knew he was inside. He didn't answer. I went down the side of the house to have a look at this glass sliding door. And as I got to within about 2 feet of the sliding door, he was in a position to see me, and he immediately started shooting. He was using a SKK, Chinese military weapon, semi-automatic, 7.62 or 308 caliber. He fired 18 times and hit me 14 times.
So, how long were you there before this actually went? It doesn't sound like you were there for that long of a period of time before this actually happened.
Within the first minute,
So,
we drove up to the house, jumped out of the car, went straight to the front door, knocked, no answer, knocked a second time. I'd already started moving down the side of the house, no answer again. I went down towards the house itself. Now, I should have actually, I've failed here. I should have told you before, the vision of this entry is available on YouTube and on my website. So you can actually see us driving up, knocking on the front door. You can hear him shooting. You can hear me shooting back. And you can hear me calling out to my mates, "I'm hit, I'm hit."
all right. So he fires at you and he hits you 14 times. So, all right, take us from there. So now you got me wondering what's going on because you said it was 3 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. 3 hours. So when he hits me, I have absolutely no idea what's happening to me. I am literally just walking up to the sliding door and then suddenly starting to fall to the ground. And in my mind, I'm not feeling any pain. I'm not feeling any impact. I'm not even hearing the sound of gunfire at this stage. All I know is I'm falling to the ground and I start cursing myself. How can I be so stupid as to be falling? As I'm halfway to the ground, I'm looking at that glass sliding door, and all of a sudden I see small round holes that hadn't been there just a moment before. And then I hear the sound of gunfire somewhere in the distance behind me, but I still haven't felt any pain and I haven't felt any impact. And so as I'm falling to the ground, I rationalize to myself, I'm falling, no reason, small round holes, sound of gunfire, I must be getting shot. Right. So I've actually rationalized this in the slow motion of me falling to the ground. This has all run through my mind and it's happened in that space of time. I've fallen to the ground, my feet pointing in the direction of where the bullet's coming from, my head facing away. And this is when he's still firing at me. And two bullets hit my left thigh. These are the only two bullets I can remember hitting me. And when they hit me, I remember time literally slowed down for me. These two bullets are fired 18 in less than 5 seconds. So these two hit in about that space of time. But to me, they seem to take 30 seconds to hit me, have their impact. Shockwave went up through my body. Shockwave came back down. The second bullet hit. And again, it's that shockwave impact up and down. And I realized that I need to fire back. Just to give him something to worry about and some reason to stop shooting me. I can't see him. It's dark inside the house. The sun is behind me, so this glass door is like a mirror. I can't see into the house, but I can hear the sound of where the gunfire is coming from. So I'm lying on my back and I just line up to shoot in the direction of where the gunfire is. Not expecting to hit him, but I know that if I put bullets down range, he's going to get worried. He's going to have a reason to find reason to stop shooting and protect himself. But as I start lining up, and this is where my thinking goes a little bit outside the square, a little bit outside the norm. As I'm lining up, I realize that I'm shooting along the length of my body because I'm lying on my back. My feet are at the other end, and my feet are pointing up. And I realize I need to get up just that little bit to shoot over the top of my feet. But I've got a flak vest on, I've got weaponry, I've got equipment. And as I lift my upper body up, my feet come up to counterbalance. And the thought that runs through my head at that time was, I better not shoot myself in the foot, because the guys at work will give me shit for the rest of my life. You can just imagine you get shot 14 times and then you shoot yourself as well. Now, that's literally what I thought. Okay. It didn't stop me from doing anything I needed to do. And you'll hear the sound of gunfire in this video. He's shooting and then I shoot straight back at him. It doesn't detract anything. But when we are well prepared for what we can expect to encounter in our day-to-day lives, my life with Star Group, your listeners will be having their own background. When we are well prepared for what we can expect, we can then well prepare for how we're going to respond to it. And the one thing that I knew I needed to do was control panic, control shock, and respond in a planned and professional way rather than a panic mode way. I didn't want to get into fight and flight. So I knew I needed to respond that way. And 5 years prior to the shooting, I'd said to myself, if I do get shot, what's going to happen in my mind? And then how will my body respond to that? And so I already had plans in place to be able to manage that mindset so I could stay calm and rational and do what I needed to do.
Yeah, that was something I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you, is that something that had crossed your mind when you were on the road or when you were beginning your training for Star? Did you ever think about what you would do in those scenarios? You know, you hear about the kids who want to be basketball players and count down from 5 and shoot the basket to win the championship. You know, totally different levels of, you know, intensity and, you know, what could happen. But did you ever, I guess you just said it, you thought about what you would do in those situations?
It's exactly the same process as the basketballers. It's exactly the same process as business people need to implement for their businesses. It is all about visualization. Visualize what you can realistically expect to encounter in your day-to-day life. How's that going to make you feel? How are you going to be able to respond to it? How have you responded to those feelings of overwhelm, panic, emergencies in the past? What have you done to be able to calm yourself down and make rational, planned, professional decisions and take the action you're proud of? And the other thing you've got to think about is, when have I been in those situations and I haven't done it? What can I then change? So it's all about visualization. And 5 years, during this 5 year period between when I joined Star Group and the shooting, I had gone through this in my mind. We weren't trained to do this. This is just something that I picked up intuitively or from books that I'd read or exposure that I'd had, but it's not something we were trained in Star Group. But I went through this in my mind. If I get shot, what's going to happen in my mind? How do I manage that? What will absolute perfection look like? But what would absolute chaos look like? And I planned for both ends of that continuum. And as it turned out, my situation was absolute chaos. So I said, if it ends up in chaos, what can I do to influence those situations to get myself back to a place where I can make rational, planned, logical responses to this and give myself the best chance of survival?
Now, do you think, how big of a role do you put your ability to survive on that training that you did yourself? I mean, no one told you to do that, but you preparing yourself mentally for a situation that occurred and then it occurring, how big of a role did that play in your ability to survive in that situation right there?
I have absolutely no doubt that mindset was one of the biggest influences in that circumstance. And don't get me wrong, I was extremely fit at the time, and that made a big difference. My resting heart rate at the time was merely 38 beats per minute, my resting heart rate. And I can't remember the the NFL footballer, um, Taylor Swift's boyfriend. What's his name?
Tra- Travis Kelsey.
Oh, yep. I think it was him that said, at this level, there is no um, there is no room for luck. Everything has to be planned. Everything has to be done perfectly. There is no room for luck. We need to know what we're doing and how to implement it. We need to know what the scenarios are and all the options for how we're going to respond to them. But it's the same in everyday life. As we've discussed, I talk to kids in schools about their challenges. I talk to hairdressers. I talk to real estate. I talk to fighter pilots. I talk to executives. The idea of visualizing what you are going to be challenged by and then having a planned response to it, but also being open to, if this doesn't go perfectly, what else can I do? It's not about plan A and plan B. It's about plan C, D, E, F, G. Having all those options available to you.
Well, so you're lying there, so you fire back, and then what happens? So because you said it was about
So
3 hours.
yeah, absolutely. I was lying there. I fired back. He stopped. I've then rolled to my right a couple of times to get out of the line of fire. I've managed to get to my feet. Now I'm dealing with some major injuries here. I've got multiple massive life-threatening injuries where bullets have gone in, severed arteries, damaged my stomach, just missed my femoral artery, took out 80% of the thickness of my Achilles tendon. But I still managed to get to my feet, and I stagger around the corner looking for somewhere safe to hide. I'd only taken about 8, 9, 10 steps. And my legs grow so weak that I'm about to fall to the ground, and I just lean against the wall, give myself some support while I'm conceptualizing the next part of my plan. Um, but where I was at that time wasn't safe, so I started moving around the next corner of the house. It was sort of a tiered house. So I start moving around the next corner of the house. But as I take 2 or 3 steps away from this wall that I was using for support, my legs collapse and I fall to my knees. I crawl along on my knees for about 2 or 3 meters. Body getting weaker again, I fell to my hands and knees. Now I've got a pistol in one hand, open hand the other, but I'm crawling along on my hands and knees for 2 or 3 meters. And when I look up, there is a fence in front of me, and there is no way in the world I've got the energy to climb that fence. And so I just collapse to the ground, roll onto my back, and that's where I lie for about the next 3 hours. At that stage, my mind went into complete panic because I'd never seen myself in a position where I couldn't do something to influence the outcome. But here I was, absolutely pinned on the ground and nothing I could do.
So why did it take 3 hours? I mean, you had support with you. What happened during those 3 hours?
So when he started shooting, the guys did not realize that I was hit. Right? And their instant reaction, they're standing at the front of the house. Their instant reaction was, without even saying a word to each other, they just looked at each other and went, "This is not a good place to be. We need to move." As soon as they started moving away from the house, that's when I call out, "I'm hit, I'm hit." And as they're moving away and they're now in no man's land, so they can't just stop and replan, they're in no man's land. They've got to move to a place of strength. And they kept on going to that place of strength. And then they started calling out, "Derrick, where are you, Derrick?" And trying to find me. I couldn't hear them. They could no longer hear me. But because of what the shooter was doing, he got them pinned down. He was just shooting randomly around the house. But to them, it seemed like he had a sniper's location because several times those bullets just came within inches of them. In fact, 2 guys went in behind a shed, um, and they knew that they didn't have protection, but it was concealment, so that was a start. But he did see them move in behind the shed, and he started shooting through that shed, and the bullets came between them, above them, just below them, and so they thought he knows exactly where we are. They were pinned down. We had to call for backup. We were rural. Now, if this incident had happened to anybody else, we were the response team. And if it had happened to somebody else, we would have been there within 45 minutes because it was so rural. But we now had to call for the backup team. The backup team were out training, and they had to get back to base, rekit and regroup, and then get out to where we were. So the reason I was 3 hours on the ground, my mates were pinned down, and it was just logistics of getting that backup team to us.
Okay, so what? So how did the day? What? Let's not even get to the end of the day. What's going through your mind? I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many questions here, Derek, that I have to ask you. But what is going through your mind? I mean, you're there by yourself. I'm sure. I don't know if you can hear the gunfire or what's going on, but what is going through your mind at this time for those 3 hours?
So there's an absolute ton that goes through my mind, and we would be here for 3 weeks if we tried to distill everything that went through my mind. But the main things that I like to talk to people about is that in that initial stage where my mind was in panic, "Oh my gosh, what do I do? I can't do anything to influence it here." That's when he starts shooting through bricks in the wall directly above me. Now I think he's standing in the kitchen at this time and shooting out through the kitchen, because I'm directly underneath the window of the kitchen. So as I think he's in the kitchen, instead of lying flat, I bring myself to a 45-degree angle up against the wall so that I lower my profile. If he looks out that window, he may not see me. But as he's shooting through the bricks and the dust is coming out, I look at the trajectory of the dust, and the dust is shooting straight out. And if the dust is going straight out, that means he's at that level. So at that time, I realized he's actually in the attic of the house. He's upstairs, right? And so he's not a direct threat to me. And at that time, my mind instantly went into relaxation mode. All right, let's start doing some planning, because he's not a threat up there. And the 4 things that I knew I needed to do, and this was pre-planned, pre-thought out. I needed to control panic, not let panic take control of the situation. I needed to control my physiological response to shock, and take control of shock in my body. I needed to slow down my heart rate, and I needed to slow down my breathing, because if I could slow down those 4 things, it would slow down my rate of bleeding, and I would survive for that little bit longer. So while he was shooting, I was able to be a little bit relaxed and focused on my body. But when he stopped shooting and he started what I presume he was stopping shooting for, he'd run out of bullets, reloading magazines, and he had 30-round banana magazines that went into the bottom of these SKKs. He was reloading them. There was silence. And in that silence, my panic started to rise again, because I didn't know where he was. And my thought was, maybe he's coming back to get me. And something that I'd never thought of prior to. When I first got hit, I've called out, I'm hit, I'm hit. When I go around the corner and I'm leaning against the wall, I call out to my mates, I'm hit, I'm hurt, and I need help. I then go around the corner and collapse to the ground. And that's when I realize that there's nothing I can do. But he knows I'm hit, I'm hurt, and I need help. And there's now silence. I don't know where he is. So I have called out loud as I possibly could. I am hit, I'm hurt, but I can still shoot. Now, we can get really creative in the midst of our worst nightmares, such as this, but in any circumstance, if we're well prepared for it and we're able to get our mind set into a place where it's relaxed and it can start looking outside the square. And that's where I came up with that. I'm hit, I'm hurt, but I can still shoot. I don't know whether he heard me, but my intention was to play with his psychology and give him reason to think that he would still be threatened if he was going to come out and try and shoot me again.
That's unbelievable. And you've been talking and telling us a story for, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes or so. You've not mentioned once about anything about pain. I could imagine. I can, no, never mind. I can't imagine getting shot one time, let alone 14
Yeah.
times. I mean, what, did you feel the pain? You had to feel something. I mean, what was the pain like while you're lying there trying to?
This is something that surprises me as much as it surprises anybody else. The pain was not excruciating for me. I don't know why doctors can't explain it to me. To me, it just felt like somebody had punched me in the guts for these 2 bullets that hit my stomach, gave me a dead leg for the 2 bullets that hit my left thigh. My forearm was broken in 2 places. There's a massive hole ripped in my forearm where the bullet had exploded once it hit the bone, and the bone exploded and mushroomed out. I didn't feel any pain from that at all. So it wasn't excruciating. I was able to acknowledge it. I knew that I'd been shot. There was no denial in my mind. This was serious. I was facing life-threatening injuries, but I knew it was about controlling panic, controlling shock, slowing down the heart rate, slowing down the breathing, so that I would bleed. Massive injuries. I needed to slow down that breathing, slow down that bleeding as much as possible. But the pain didn't even kick in for the 3 hours I was lying on the ground, and I was fully conscious for that entire 3 hours. All I knew was that I had been hit in the stomach, hit in the thigh. I didn't feel my Achilles tendon. There was absolutely no idea that I'd been hit in the Achilles tendon. Doctors are surprised I was able to walk, after such major injuries.
Yeah, like I said, I couldn't imagine one time, let alone 14, and you're sitting here telling your story. Now you had no idea what was going on with the backup team coming. What
No, no.
what how did it all, I mean, come to a head? How did it all end? How were they able to get to you, and you know
So I was lying on the ground for 3 hours, but for the 3 hours I was lying on the ground, I had absolute, complete, 100% faith that my mates would be doing anything they could to possibly get to me, while not risking their lives too much. The boys called, and this is before mobile phones, so we were working on pager systems and radios. So they had to get a radio message back to base. The base had to then send out a pager message to the team. They were down in a gully doing cliff rescue training because that was part of our tasks as well. So it took a while to get that there. The boys got to me, got out to the scene about 2 hours 45 after I was shot. And they were only on the ground for about 5 minutes before they'd formulated a plan to come in and get me. Now, if you can get your head around this, if I had died and I was able to then come back and do a review of this incident, their decision to come in at that time was stupid. They had very little idea of where the shooter was. They had no idea as to whether he had a position that he could shoot them as they were coming in. They literally knew they were risking their lives to come in and get me. But that is the faith that I had in my mates for the entire 3 hours that I was on the ground. If they could do anything to get to me, they would do everything they possibly could. And that was another reason that gave me that motivation, that inspiration to believe that I could survive, because my mates were going to be there as soon as they possibly could.
so they
So
weren't even worried
when
about the
they,
shooters. They came to
oh no,
get
they
you.
were just one shooter. They certainly were worried about him, but the highest priority was to get into me. I'd been on the ground for 2 and 3/4 hours when they decided to come in. I wasn't able to get in radio communication with them, so they had no idea whether I was dead or alive, whether they were coming in to pick up Derrick or whether they were coming in to pick up a body. When the boys came in to get me, they risked their lives. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had a briefing, and in that briefing, they were told, "We don't know whether Derrick's dead or alive. We don't know whether you may be shot and injured. You may be shot and killed. And if anybody doesn't want to go in, now is the time to say." Every one of those guys stepped up to the plate and said, "No, this is the job I've chosen. I want to go in." We had guys arguing, saying, "I've been in the section longer. I have greater skills." Blah blah blah. They wanted to risk their lives to come in and get me. So really quite amazing. They came in. The shooter heard the truck coming in. It was an F-250 truck, and the shooter heard that, and he increased the rate of his fire. He started shooting faster, and then started directing the shooting down into the house because they thought they were going to storm the house. He thought they were going to storm the house. But the boys came in. They went to fully auto fire as well to give themselves cover. They got to me, and at the time they got to me, my vision had already closed down, and it didn't go to shades of grey or black. It went to an absolutely pristine white. A lot of theories behind what that white means to a lot of different people, and I don't have a religious connection at all, but I understand what it means to some people. But for me, it just meant there wasn't enough blood going to my brain to keep the vision going, and thoughts of death had already started to overwhelm me. But it was also the time where I've gone, "Derrick, keep on fighting. Derrick, stay calm, controlled, and do what you need to do. Don't give up." But when the boys came in, that vision came back up to absolutely perfect again because there was an adrenaline hit. And when the boys got to me, they picked me up, took me out past the point where I'd been shot before, back out to the van, and took me out to waiting doctors. Now, the doctors were actually waiting in a place where they were also threatened. For the 10 minutes that they treated me to stabilize me, there were bullets whizzing around their ears. And so one of my mates from Star Group has walked up to the doctor and said, "Doctor, don't worry about the bullets. Don't worry about the shooter. I've got a flak vest on. I'm going to stand between you and the shooter. and I've got the flak vest on, so I'm going to be all right, and so will you. The doctor has his own military exposure as well and experience. He looked at this guy's flak vest, and the doctor has a dry sense of humour. So when he told me this story, it was a very dry story, but it was certainly the humour embedded in it. He said, Derrick, I looked at this guy, looked him up and down, looked at his flak vest, and then I've looked at your flak vest, which is full of holes. He said, I didn't say anything to him at the time, but I knew there was a little bit of irony in what he was saying to me. But that's the sort of reliability I had, the faith in my mates. They will do whatever they could to make sure I was given the best opportunity to survive that. They would be with me. They would protect me. And that is what is embedded within our teams. It gives us the confidence to go out and do what we need to do. And I'm sure that the mates you have that are troopers in the US, you would see that within their cohort as well.
Yeah, I would see that. So, so you're out of not out of harm's way, but you're being attended to. Did How did it finally end with the subject in the house? Just because I have a question
So,
about that.
yeah, no
No,
worries.
I was.
Yeah. I was on the ground for 3 hours. This siege went for 41 hours. So they got me out, took me away to hospital. My mates and the entire South Australian Police Department, because it wasn't just Star Group now. There was, if there weren't 400 police officers surrounding that property and looking after the public as well as containing the incident, I'd be surprised. But that siege went on for 41 hours. He stayed in the house for 41 hours. There were 2,000 rounds of ammunition fired, predominantly while I was on the ground, but a few after I was taken out as well. And after 41 hours, my team, I was in hospital at this stage, I obviously wasn't there, but my teams had implemented tactics to make him realize he needed to come out, and he gave himself up. He had some minor injuries at that time where I'd fired back. I hit a brick next to his forehead, and there was a little bit of shrapnel and a little bit of brick in his forehead, and one of the bullets skipped across his lower back. So I was certainly shooting in the right direction, just going by that sound of gunfire. But that siege went on for 41 hours.
So he made it out alive. So, I don't know which question to ask first. I want to ask about, I want to ask about your recovery and all of that, and any, mental, things that came from it, depression, anxiety, I'm sure PTSD. And I also want to ask about your ability to, have you ever saw him? Have you ever talked to him? Have you ever, any kind of, has he ever, did he ever say why he did it? So you take whichever question you want and then answer the next one.
Any one of those 15 questions. So he came out without injuries. It took me 2.5 years to recover physically from all my injuries. But the one interesting thing out of that is physically, it took me 2.5 years. I was over it mentally and emotionally and psychologically like that, because I believe that I'd done my recovery prior to the shooting. I anticipated there might be nightmares, flashbacks, panic attacks, all those sorts of things. So I went and spoke to a psych 3 months after the shooting. First meeting with a psych, and it was about a 3-hour meeting. He picked my brain, I picked his brain, and he said, Derrick, psychologically, you are absolutely fine. Psychologically, you can go back to work tomorrow. And I didn't need any ongoing therapy. And that is where this idea of sustainable optimal performance, of human durability, actually comes from. Now, I can't remember all your other questions. Yeah, remind me. What were your other
No,
questions?
have you ever seen the gentleman? I
Oh,
mean, I'm sure there were court dates.
yeah.
Did you forgive him? Did you? I mean, what is the feeling towards him? I mean, just speak on what you think about the whole situation. Forgive him. Your feelings about him. What is it?
Yeah, right. So during my recovery, like psychologically, I could go back to work the next day. Physically, I couldn't go back to Star Group. So when I first went back, I went into our internal investigations program, where we are investigating complaints against police. Those investigations took me out to the prison where he was held. Now, I wasn't put into any threatening situations in relation to him or any other prisoner. But when I was out there, there was a massive glass wall. He was standing the other side of the glass wall. I was this side of the glass wall. And I saw him. He saw me. And I saw him going around to his mates and nudging them and saying, hey, and pointing at me, presumably saying that's the cop that I shot. It did not intimidate me. Those are the sorts of things that I kind of anticipated would happen. Didn't expect that exact scenario, but it didn't faze me at all. I just thought he's just been a dick, just trying to big note himself. When we got to court, I then got to see him face to face. In the first court trial, and there were two trials, he had a retrial. In the first trial, I didn't have to speak to him at all. He was represented by a barrister, a lawyer, and he did all the questioning. I was in the witness box for a full day, being questioned by the barrister. Absolutely exhausting. At the end of the day, he's asked me questions about the words that I said at 8 a.m. that morning. So exhausting. But they appealed his conviction and won the appeal to a retrial. In the second trial, he didn't have a barrister looking after him. He was his own lawyer. So I was now being questioned in the witness box by the guy who had shot me 14 times. I was in that witness box for 5 days straight. And so, yes, we did get to converse. We backwards and forwards. He was badgering me, harassing me, trying to make me look stupid, and was given a court power to have authority over me, to make me dance to his tune, which again didn't faze me. Right? It did not intimidate me. I understood what the process was. And then I went away and I sat with myself and I went through that visualization again. What's this going to seem like? What's going to happen? What could he possibly ask me? How will he try to intimidate me physically, mentally, psychologically, just by being in that courtroom? At one stage during one of the breaks where the judge wasn't in the room, I was at the bar table talking to the prosecutor. He was standing at the bar table in the position of the defense. Now, it's held in by a very low lying row of books, like a small library, but it was only, waist height. And as I'm talking to the prosecutor, he has come up as close as he possibly could and he's just gone, "Hello, Mr. McManus, how are you today?" And I just turned, looked at him with contempt, and then continued on my conversation with the prosecutor and didn't even acknowledge him again after that. But he did that all the way through. At the end of that trial, after 5 days, his closing summing up, he started saying things like, "Mr. McManus, I'm very sorry this happened to you. I don't know how it happened to you exactly, but I'm very sorry." And the judge cut him off, which I was very pleased about. He's never accepted responsibility for this. He said that he shot the rifle because he had gunshot residue on his hands. He shot the rifle, but he shot low and only shot near me. When I've gone around the corner of this house, maybe his wife has opened up the other door and she shot him with one of the other rifles that were in the house. The other thing that he postulated about was that I actually think that Derrick's mates in Star Group hated him and they put him up against a wall and shot him 5 times with a shotgun. Now, believe it or not, that is something that he put to the court. Now, the idea of this is that if you can raise a doubt in the mind of the jury as to whether he's guilty or innocent, and it doesn't have to be, yeah, he's definitely guilty, it's just this doubt, maybe he's innocent, they have to find you innocent. They have to find you not guilty, my apologies. And so he was just trying to raise that doubt, and it was quite clever. But both trials, he was found guilty. 22 years jail, 18 years non-parole. He spent the full 22 years in jail. The other question you asked is, do I have any hatred for him? Now, going through my rehab initially, I used to make notes of my feelings, my emotions when I was going through what the experiences were. And when I read back through it, there is this one paragraph of about 4 to 6 lines, which is just pure, vicious, venomous hatred for the man. But I'm very happy that I wrote it down there because I don't remember it. And people say to me, "Do you want retribution? Do you want revenge?" No, I don't. if I did and I acted upon it, what sort of person would that make me? That
Right.
would make me exactly the same person as he is. Now, this is something that people have to get their head around. My God, he shot you. Surely you want to pay him back. No, this is about taking responsibility for our choices and our actions and our consequences, and then the future afterwards. It's something that in my workshops I talk very specifically about. The question I like to put to people in my workshops is, who's responsible for me being shot? And everybody goes immediately, oh, well, the shooter. I'm good. Excellent. Let's blame him. Who else can we blame? Okay, your boss, your mates, manufacturers of weapons, manufacturers of bullets, all those sorts of things. And eventually people start saying, actually, you're responsible. And that's the point that I want to get to. I made a choice to go into Star Group. I made a choice to go to that house. I made a choice to go down the side of the house. So I put myself in a position where this could happen to me. Now, I'm not responsible for the whole thing, but I'm responsible for my part. And unless I take responsibility for that part, I've got no opportunity to change it. He needs to take responsibility for his part, which publicly he never has. I have absolutely no doubt that he knows exactly what happened, but publicly he's never accepted responsibility for it. So, taking responsibility for my actions, I don't have want of retribution, revenge. I just want to put as much energy as I can into recreating the life that I can have now. And as a result of that, I've been able to go back to Star Group, fully operational. I have a sensational life now where I am fully active. People say you must be still carrying injuries from those massive injuries that you incurred. And yes, I do have injuries and I do have disablements, but I don't have disabilities that are normally associated with that. At the end of 2022, I rode my mountain bike over the top of the Himalayas, 5,416 meters at minus 15 degrees. I've competed in triathlons. I still swim. I ride 100 kilometers, which is 62 miles for you, every Saturday morning because I still maintain that level of fitness. If I'd been focused on taking revenge, I wouldn't have put the work in here because that's where my energy would have gone. Now, the other side that I like to reflect on is if something bad did happen to him, I may buy a nice bottle of whiskey. I may open it on that night, but I don't want to cause those injuries.
Wow, that's that story is amazing. So, but you now, so I don't even know what to say about the story. Um, Sustained optimal performance. You mentioned that. So, what are you doing now? So now you speak on it and you go around. What? How did you turn this into almost like a? I don't want to say second career because I don't think you had planned on this happening. I don't think
No,
anybody plans
definitely
on this.
not.
But I think what you did is you've taken from the negative and turned it into a positive. What are you doing now with everything? What does your career look like now?
Yeah, okay. So when I came out of the shooting and I started going back to work, I got approached by corporate saying, "You have got to come and tell my people. My people have got to hear this story. It is just so powerful." And I understood that, but I thought they wanted me to come and tell a hero story, and I think that's all they wanted at the time. And I've just gone, do you know something? I'm not the hero. The guys that came in to get me, the doctors that saved my life, stood in direct line of fire for 10 minutes to protect me and look after me. They're the heroes. If you want to pay money for a story, pay them. I don't want to know about it. But in the 7 hours after my rescue, I used 24 units of blood. And the body only holds 10 units. I used 24 units in 7 hours. And the blood service came and said, would you be able to come and say thank you to blood donors and encourage more blood donors? And I've gone, yeah, absolutely. I can do that. It was pro bono. There was no payment. And it was just me saying thank you to some of the other people that had saved my life. But once I started doing that, I realized that there was more than just a hero story to it, and there were these deep-seated, deep-bedded messages that could inspire people to take more control of their life. People in these blood service ceremonies where we're saying thank you for making 100 donations, which at that stage took 25 years to make 100 donations. So for me to be able to say thank you was quite an honor. But they would come up to me afterwards and they'd be saying, wow, Derek, you've changed my life. My perspective has changed. My partner needs to hear this story. And I've just started thinking, okay, what else is there that I'm saying? So I started analyzing it. Um, and through the questions that people have asked me and the inquiries they've made, I've started looking at it. A lot of people said this is resilience, and there is a lot of resilience in it, but I see that it's gone beyond resilience. This was about sustaining optimal performance. You can't just get shot and then just go, well, I'm just going to bounce back now, because I was lying on the ground for 3 hours before I had that opportunity to bounce back. So it was about sustainable, optimal performance. What's the very best I could do in those circumstances? And that's very different to peak performance. Star Group, Special Operations, Delta Force, Marines, SWAT, Police Force generally are all expected to be peak performers at all the time. If I had tried to sustain peak, I would have bled to death. My heart would have been racing, my breathing would have been shallow and panting. I would have bled out within minutes. And so I had to say to myself, what's the very best I can do in those circumstances? And in those circumstances, it was lying on my back, controlling shock, controlling panic, slowing down my heart rate, slowing down my breathing. And I now apply these same principles as well as two different models of resilience. One is aspirational resilience, one is functional resilience. The four levels of responsibility, taking responsibility for our choices, taking responsibility for our actions, taking responsibility for our consequences, but also taking responsibility proactively for what does the future look like after those consequences, whether they are good or whether they are bad. What does that future look like, and how much influence can you have in that? I've got 5 drivers for success, which apply to kids in schools as much as they apply to fighter pilots. And I do get to travel the world these days. I've been to the US probably 4 times now and looking to come back again this year. I've been to Vietnam 3 times and spoken in universities in Vietnam. Uh, one company forced me to go to Fiji for a week. It was hard, but I managed to do it. But I was working with that company and their people for that entire week, just embedding workshops for them. Um, and it's a real privilege to be able to do that. But I still come from the personal philosophy of being able to say thank you to those people who helped me and being able to pass on messages. Yes, I tell this story. Yes, people see me as a hero, but I do not like to be seen as a hero. The heroes were the guys who came in to get me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you know, to turn what the events that happened to you and to, first of all, just shake off the idea of being a hero and giving it to the guys that came in to save you. Um, I just, you know, my, as you mentioned, my two closest friends are troopers in New Jersey. And not to talk about myself, but when I went away, I was lodged with um, law enforcement and military. I lucked out and was put in there when I went to Sierra Tucson. And as we had spoken a couple days ago and earlier today, you know, the amount of respect I have for people like you, Derek, and my buddies at home, and even the people I don't know who walk the streets every day, who protect our towns, our cities, our states, our country. You know, I don't know if people really understand, like you said, like these are choices that you make. You, Derek, made that decision to walk to the side of that house and to look at that, and I don't think people really, you know, I don't think they understand that you're taking that risk for everybody else around you, and you're taking that responsibility. You're not blaming that on anybody. And I think, just listening to your story and hearing you speak about it, and then going out and, giving these, the sustained optimal performance whole, lectures and things, you know, kind of teaching people about the idea of taking responsibility. I don't know. Like I said, I cannot thank you enough, for your service. I cannot thank, the men and women in the U.S., anywhere across the globe who do it. I teach school. I think that's a tough enough job. But,
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how do people get in touch with you if they're interested in hearing from you or want to find out more?
So it's certainly available on all the socials, LinkedIn, for the professionals, and certainly Facebook, Instagram. I'm on those. I haven't done TikTok yet, but maybe I'll need to go there. But certainly my email will be available in the briefing notes for this podcast. And I'm very happy just to talk to people. If they think, oh, could Derrick help us? Have a conversation with me. It'll be just like doing this podcast. There is no commercial benefit or exchange between the two of us. I just love having these conversations with people to give them more insights. And if I can come over to the US and help companies or work with, I would love to get into some of the schools in the US as well, because I love working in schools. There's no two ways about it, because I believe that if we can get these messages of positivity and strength and taking proactive, conscious responsibility for our choices and our actions, if we can do that early while they're still in school, they'll have a better schooling environment. They'll have better schooling outcomes. And that doesn't mean that they have to stay in school, but if school is not for them, they will make positive choices about this is definitely not for me. I will make a positive choice to take this direction and go into a skills-based profession. But they'll also have that life afterwards with those lessons learned at that early stage. It's one of the areas I love working, but love working with the corporates as well, especially when they take me away to Fiji. Just saying.
Yeah, my school district never sent me to Fiji. I did go to Disney World, but not Fiji. Derrick, I cannot thank you enough. It's been a privilege and an honor. I told you that when we had our little pre-production meeting, how thankful I was for you to, accept coming on to Moderate to Severe and to share your story. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I cannot thank you enough. We met a couple weeks ago, but yet, not even your story, but what you do, really resonates with me. I think it resonates with a lot of people. I think anybody who hears it, it would resonate in some sense. Any closing words? Anything you want to just say before we say goodbye?
I'd actually just like to thank you for that closing you gave there, because a lot of people say, oh, the story is amazing, but you've just articulated it's not just the story, it's the rest of everything that comes behind it, because that's where my focus is. There's no two ways about it. The story is engaging and it gives me some credibility to be able to tell those messages afterwards. But it's those messages that I want people to walk away with. People can take more responsibility for their choices and actions and consequences. They can create the outcomes they want if we do it proactively. The one thing that really disappoints me is people make choices and they just look at the shiny things that might come up. And if they come up, it's great, but they don't actually say, these are the things that can go bad. They work within a comfort zone. Let's extrapolate it and let's look at the worst case scenario. And if you get to that point where you say, do you know something, I couldn't handle that worst case scenario, then you're making the wrong choice. Don't expose yourself to it. You can do similar things, but scale it back a little bit. If you can't handle worst case scenario, don't take the chance of putting yourself there. But we need to be able to have those conversations and do it proactively rather than going, oh my God, I didn't realize this could happen. I'm now in the circumstances. How do I get creative? Because if you try to get creative in the midst of adversity, you just can't. Okay. It's that relaxed frame of mind, that mindset that allows you to get creative in the middle and find the results you want. So let's do it proactively.
It's a great point. And every day I told you I give a little speech, and I think tomorrow's is going to be about the fact of taking responsibility. And if you can't handle the consequences, don't do what you're thinking. Derrick, like I said, I appreciate you. Your story's great. People listening, share this out there. Let's get Derrick another trip to the U.S. I think he would do a lot of good for our young people, the people in corporate. I think he would do good for anybody. I think we need to be able to have a responsibility. I think we have a responsibility to take responsibility for our actions. I think it's something that's long overdue. I think people, try to push off the responsibility on other people and want to kind of say the I'm sorry and don't want to deal with the repercussions. But I think it's time that, you need to think of the responsibility. And Derrick, I never thought about it like that, but you did. You made me think about it. So for that and for you for coming on, I really thank you.
Sensational. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you for what you're doing. You've taken your own worst case scenario, and you're making something positive out of it as well, and that's for the benefit of other people. And I really appreciate it. And that's one of the reasons that as soon as you approached me, I've just gone, yep, no problems. I'll be on this show.
Derrick, it was great having you. I appreciate that, and we'll talk soon.
And that wraps up another episode of Moderate to Severe. Remember, it is okay to not be okay. Mental health is a journey, and every step counts, no matter how small. I hope today's discussion resonated with you and reminded you that you are not alone in this journey. Please do not use this advice medically, as this is just my story and my tales. If you need help, please seek it out from a medical professional, go to a hospital, or call 988, the suicide hotline. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with your friends or family. Let's crack the stigma and keep the conversation going. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and join us next week. Take care of yourselves, and remember that reaching out for help is a sign of strength. Until next time, keep looking after your mental health and supporting each other. This is Jonathan Scott. Have a great day.